I don't think people remember how bad it was along our beaches. Miami Beach's mayor said business was so bad he was happy just to see prostitutes. I mean, you can't get much worse than that, right? Without the beach, there was no economy. Welcome to Shaping Shores, the Centennial podcast of the American Shore and Beach Preservation Association. For 100 years, ASBPA has united people across science, policy, and practice to preserve U.S. shores and beaches. If you're listening, you should be one of these people. Become a member or make a gift today at asbpa.org. I'm your host, Nicole Elko, ASBPA's Executive Director, and today we continue our ongoing series with ASBPA's Coastal Champions, discussing how we're shaping the shores of tomorrow. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Kate Gooderham, co-owner of Gooderham and Associates based in Fort Myers, Florida. Kate served as the ASBPA Executive and Managing Director from 2004 to 2021, and along with Ken Gooderham, have undoubtedly contributed more to ASBPA than any other single individual. Kate, welcome. How are you today?
I'm very well. It's good to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to be having this conversation with you. It's going to be a little bit different, I think, than some of the other chats we've had with traditionally trained coastal scientists and engineers. So you came into the coastal engineering world from a little bit different angle. Why don't we start out with hearing that story?
Yes, my story is very different. I was an English and a history major in college, so do not have the level of science background of all your other participants. But a friend of mine was the project manager for the South Seas Beach Restoration Project, which was the first entirely independent beach restoration project. And he needed an assistant to help him through the process. And so he figured that I was a good thinker and a good learner, and that I could be taught the things I needed to know, but I worked well with people and had some other attributes he was looking for. So that's how I came on board. He was a coastal engineer. So he taught me a great deal, but also he brought in other people to educate me, including Bob Deans, and you can't do better than that for a mentor.
Yeah, absolutely. So South Seas Plantation, where in the world is that?
Okay, South Seas Plantation is located off Fort Myers, Florida, which is in the southwest part of the state, and it's a 5-mile long island that is mostly privately owned. And the northern 1/3 of the island it has changed names over the year, but at the time it was called South Seas Plantation.
Okay, so Captiva, San Novel kind of area.
Yes.
And then what would you say is the first sort of independent project? You mean sort of not Army Corps of Engineers? So was it just privately funded?
It was completely privately funded. The property owners paid for it, and they were approximately 500 property owners were each assessed for the project. So it was very interesting. Part of my job was to encourage them to sign a petition which said that they agreed to pay the assessment. And so that was a big part of the initial part of my job, was convincing people that that was a good use of their money and a pretty good chunk of change.
Well, that makes sense to me. You've always been a great communicator of the importance of beaches. Kate, you kind of invented the Best Restored Beach Award for ASBPA to illustrate the importance of these types of projects, right?
Yeah, I got really sick of listening to people say bad things about beach restoration projects, people who had no clue what they were talking about. And so I decided that I wanted to showcase the projects around the hundreds of projects around the United States that were saving their communities. I mean, in the case of Miami Beach, that community was going to die without sand on their beach. And how important it was to the economy, how important it was to each community. And so over the years, that has continued after I left, but over the years, we've been able to spotlight some wonderful, wonderful projects.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, I guess around that same time, that was when a lot of the beaches in Florida and up and down the East Coast, when you were working on the project in Captiva, the beaches had eroded almost entirely, right? So it was a critical time in beach management in the country.
It was particularly interesting in this project. The erosion had gotten so bad that truly no property had no value because nothing was selling. And I would talk with real estate agents and they'd say, really, property had no value because no one was willing to buy it when they saw the amount of erosion and the whole really miserable situation. Captiva was truly, truly sand-starved. And part of the island was too busy fighting with itself, which is why South Seas went ahead and did their own project.
Yeah, I remember. I use a quote a lot when I give presentations on the history of beach nourishment from a Time magazine article with the mayor of Miami Beach. I think you remember this one. I don't think people remember how bad it was along our beaches. Miami Beach's mayor said business was so bad he was happy just to see prostitutes. I mean, you can't get much worse than that, right? Without the beach, there was no economy.
And luckily, Florida was one of the first places to really catch on to this idea. And because virtually everybody in Florida lives like within 50 miles of the beach. So there is a great vested interest that made it an easier sale than in other places. But we had to overcome some tough things too, because for many years before beach restoration became a choice and people really truly understood that the beaches were sand-starved, um, people were trying some really crazy stuff. And they were putting tires and dead Christmas trees and rubble and all kinds of bad stuff on our beaches. And so we really needed to find some solutions that worked.
Yeah, as we have gotten into the celebration of our 100 years, it's funny now to look back and for those of you that don't know, Kate was instrumental in helping us do a lot of this research. She served on a committee we called a Looking Back Committee, and kind of seeing where we were 100 years ago. And Kate, some of these problems that we talk about here, we have them today. We had them in the 80s, as we just discussed, and in fact, it was not a very different story in 1926, was it?
I think the era of the organization starting was fascinating. And if you will forgive me, I would like to read a quote from the first president of ASBPA. And we are really lucky that a lot of, we have actual transcripts of speeches. And so we can be in the room where it happened. And this is one of his speeches that he gave, or a tiny portion, the speeches were actually quite long, that he gave in 1926. And he is saying, remember, this is 1926, we have assembled here for a great purpose. The task we have undertaken is not to be completed in a day or a year, but will probably last as long as our government endures. The big problem that confronts us, as the name of our association would indicate, does not so vitally affect us as it does and will affect generations unborn. Editor's note, that's us. This fact in itself makes the work we are now embarking upon all the more worthwhile because it frees it from the tinge of self-interest. After all, we can get along with our shores and beaches in their present condition, but with the increase of population and the desire for outdoor pleasure, what of those who are to follow us? And so we are those who have followed.
Right. Amazing how true that rings even today, nearly 100 years later. Thanks for sharing that. That's fantastic. Kate's been really amazing at sharing stories like that with us, with the practitioners in the field for as long as I've known you. One of my favorite memories is some of the conferences that you organized when I was just getting involved in the organization. And I remember some of, not the founding fathers of the organization, but maybe the founding fathers of coastal engineering for our work, for our generation. And you would get them to chat with conference attendees in kind of a unique way. Can you tell us some stories about that?
Yeah, the first one I think took place in 2004 in San Francisco, but we did numerous ones thereafter. And it was Orville Magoon and Robert Weigel. And I was a bit nervous about it because, again, this is the history major who thinks this kind of stuff is really great. Preparing a luncheon for a bunch of people who weren't history majors and probably just suffered through their history courses. And so I was sitting in the back of the room, very nervous about how this was going to be received. But the people at my table who were the younger ones were really excited and really enraptured by listening to them. And I think we need to more and more share our histories with each other. And we did another thing that I think is good for saving us too, is ASBPA's top award is the Merle P. O'Brien Award. And one of the things that we've been doing is having the winners each year, and also going back to previous winners who were still alive and interviewing them for Shore and Beach. So their thoughts and ideas are captured for the future.
Yeah, it's been great to look back on some of the coastal champions who, you caught some of them just in time, right? We've actually lost quite a few of our champions over the last several years. So we really appreciate you doing all of that. You mentioned Shore and Beach. You and Ken were really well, and Ken is still involved actually to this day. So tell us a little bit about Shore and Beach, the academic journal that ASBPA has been publishing since 1933.
And a good portion of our members are members entirely because they want to get Shore and Beach. And we have libraries all over the world who are subscribers. And that's really, really exciting to know that you can go to New Zealand and read Shore and Beach in one of their libraries. A couple of things that we worked on was this is the kind of the boring stuff, but the stuff that's real critical is we wanted to make sure it came out in a timely fashion and continued its high level of scholarship. And so we encouraged the organization to hire a managing editor. And the first one of those was Beth Shadone, and she did a fabulous job of moving us forward and keeping this journal the very special magazine that it is, and that is cherished. You go to bookshelves of coastal professionals throughout the country, and they are loaded with past issues of Shore and Beach.
It's a really special publication for a lot of us in the field. And in fact, it was really instrumental in archiving or better understanding kind of how far the organization and the coastal field has come as we've thought about this 100-year celebration. I know you have read through many of these, and I think as you look through past issues of Shore and Beach, you can kind of see the evolution of the coastal practice. So we talked a little bit about people throwing Christmas trees out on the beaches and some of the ways that they were trying to combat erosion in the 80s. But we've come a long way since then, right?
Oh, we have come a long way. And one thing I forgot to say before when we were talking about Shore and Beach is one of the things that Ken and I worked on was getting Shore and Beach digitized, because we were finding it harder and harder to have a full collection of them. And so we got them digitized so those are available, all the issues forever. And, the past was a challenge because there was so much to learn. And you see that in reading through all the past issues that the first group, the founders, really wanted scholarship more than so badly because they knew they didn't know, and so that was very important. And then you get up to a time period like World War II, where it was difficult to publish Shore and Beach for a number of reasons, but one of which is that most of the coastal work being done was done in secret. And so they could not publish it until the war was over. But that also resulted in a great deal of scholarship and learning. I mean, you don't just, do a D-Day landing by, moving the boat forward and parking on the beach. You've got to understand coastal processes to do that, and hundreds of other things that were done during World War II.
Yeah, the history is really amazing. And it's fun to look back on some of the things that we thought maybe weren't as effective. At the time, seawalls in the 80s were sort of the problem because seawalls do a great job of protecting the uplands, of holding the line, right? But not so much if there's no sand in the system. But we're seeing kind of the perception of structures change, I think, recently as well. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's because so many of our beaches were sand starved that you had to kind of get the patient out of the emergency room before you could start to look at some other things. And once they got sand back in the system, then they discovered that there were what they like to call hot spots that need some special consideration, and some things that they ended up doing in combination with beach restoration projects that kept the sand on the beach longer, and also took care of some of the problems, the natural problems.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I think that's a misconception that we're still working really to clear up in ASBPA, is the fact that the beach nourishment element, that it's one piece of the puzzle, but it's the most important piece, because without sand, none of the other approaches are going to work. And I think that getting back to the Best Restored Beach Award, I think that award really is helping people understand that how important the sand is in the equation of beach preservation.
And it's also a good reminder, one of the things that's kind of funny is you will hear people say, well, we don't need to do anything for our beach. Our beach is just doing fine. And when you look below the surface, you find out it's a restored beach. It's working so well that nobody realizes that work has been done. And we have to keep that top of mind for people, or to continue to support doing beach restoration projects.
Yeah, I totally agree. There are over 480 communities nationwide that have restored their beaches, and many times the tourists or even the locals that are out there enjoying the beach have no idea that bulldozers come in every 5 years and put the sand back. So as we look ahead, it doesn't seem like replenishing the sand on the beaches is anything that's going to be changing anytime soon. But as you look to the future, what are some of your words of wisdom for the next generation of coastal leaders?
I think the only thing we can guarantee in life is change, and the new movement for more resilience is going to continue. But we need to continue our research and our working with government officials so that our beaches are taken care of, and that we continue to learn that the science and the scholarship is considered vital. So for practitioners or the general public, it's support taking care of managing our beaches, and also knowing that we're going to learn things that are going to change how we go about this. But it's going to be a continuing effort. I think we can go back to the founders that for the next 100 years, we need to continue what they had suggested in 1926.
Yeah. Yeah. And that room that he was speaking to of the folks that had gathered there in 1926, it was really a gathering of government people, right? State leaders, communities. And I think it's just as important today for coastal communities to be involved with a group like ASBPA. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. It's where it's a place to learn about beaches and beach processes and to be able to network. And I think that's terribly important. Network with both if you're a beach manager, your fellow beach managers, or whatever field you're in, but also with others. I think one of the great things about ASBPA that very seldom gets its proper recognition is that our focus is on the beach. We are not focused on being an engineer or a geologist or a biologist or a government official. We are focused on bringing all those talents and all those great minds together as a group, to solve the problems of taking care of our beaches. And I think it's a huge responsibility. And so far, the organization has done a great job because they have remembered that is their job.
That is our mission. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. Kate Gooderham, Coastal Champion, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you. It was wonderful.
That's it for today's episode of Shaping Shores. I'm Nicole, and thank you so much for spending part of your day with us. If today's conversation inspired you, help us continue this work. Become a member or make a gift at asbpa.org. To hear more stories from the people preserving U.S. coasts, follow or subscribe wherever you listen. Together, we're shaping a resilient future for our nation's beaches and shores. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you again on next week's episode.